Tucker Carlson sat down with a high-ranking individual in the Capitol Police who was essentially responsible for the security of this area, the security of members of Congress, the security of the Electoral College vote certification, and more smoke and guns were revealed. Take a listen.
Once protesters moved inside the building, Johnson's first concern was the safety of senators. His job was to protect them. In rising panic, he called over the radio for direction and assistance. Even now, 2 years later, he is baffled by the response he got.
I was requesting permission to evacuate the Senate side, the Senate chambers, because I had a clear line of sight to get them out the Senate door, and I didn't get permission. The dispatcher called a couple times to see if I can get permission. No response.
With Yogananda Pittman and his other supervisors unresponsive, Johnson says he decided to begin the evacuation of senators himself.
The person that I thought was going to authorize the evacuation didn't do it. I wanted to get those members of Congress out as quickly as I could. That's why I initiated, those evacuations. Me being disciplined, it wasn't as important as not getting the members of Congress and their staff to safety.
Footage we reviewed seems to bolster Johnson's account. The video shows Johnson conducting the evacuation of senators from the chamber. Yet Tarek Johnson was not rewarded for what he did. He was punished. A photo emerged of Johnson wearing a MAGA hat outside the Capitol. That picture cost him his career.
Sometimes I look at it and like, thank you, God, for blessing me with this hat. And sometimes I'm like, wow, I wish this hat never came in my life.
A Biden voter, Johnson says he donned the hat in an effort to rescue fellow officers he believed were trapped in the building.
I figured if I had the hat on, it'd be easier for me to navigate my way through the crowd. It was basically self-preservation and de-escalation, and I needed to get up those steps. I couldn't say what would have happened walking through that crowd without it.
But for the crime of wearing a Trump hat, Johnson found himself suspended. Ultimately, he resigned from the force and lost his pension. He now works part-time as a furniture mover. Yogananda Pittman, meanwhile, thrived. 2 days after January 6th, Nancy Pelosi elevated Pittman to acting chief of the Capitol Police. Late last year, Pittman took a high-paying job as the head of security at UC Berkeley, which is right outside Pelosi's congressional district. Berkeley announced Pittman's hiring with unqualified praise for her, quote, steadfast commitment to social justice. Pittman herself boasted about her heroic performance on January 6th. Her department, she said, quote, saved democracy that day. We reached out to Yogananda Pittman for comment, but she didn't get back to us.
A Capitol Police officer who was in charge of the security for the certification of the Electoral College. This is what we're seeing. The person who was supposed to give authorization for the evacuation of members of Congress did not respond to this Capitol Police officer. Did not respond. His boss ignored him when he called for help over the radio. Ignored him. The entire Capitol Police force was inadequately prepared, which is funny to me because a couple weeks ago, we were talking to Julie Kelly. You remember this episode. And she reminded us that Nancy Pelosi's own staffer said that they were preparing for January 6th as early as the previous summer. Preparing for January 6th, not because they were preparing for the certification of the Electoral College, but preparing for protests and potential riots and potential violence. So how is it that a staff member of a member of Congress was aware of a potential threat, but the Capitol Police, who are also under the direction of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, was unaware? The only explanation for that is it was a deliberate choice. It was a deliberate choice for Nancy Pelosi to discuss the possibility of violence planned for January 6th with her staff, and a deliberate choice by Nancy Pelosi not to inform the Capitol Police, not to adequately prepare the Capitol Police, to allow what happened to happen.